Hello and welcome. I am Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching World Today. With 48 hours to go for one of the biggest meet of the year, leaders across the globe are speaking to US President Donald Trump ahead of his meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on August 15 at Elmendorf Air Base in Alaska. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz were joined by EU Commissioner and President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte in a virtual meet with US President Donald Trump ahead of the summit scheduled in Alaska on Friday, August 15. Zelensky told President Trump that Putin is bluffing and wants to occupy all of Ukraine. The Ukrainian president also said that he was very positive after the call, but he said that there should be sanctions on Russia if the Kremlin doesn't agree to a ceasefire. He said that the US was ready to support Ukraine and ensure security guarantees. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that the priority was that fundamental European and Ukrainian security interests should be safeguarded while securing a ceasefire. NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte also said on his social media platform X that ball is now in Putin's court. A spokesperson for UK Prime Minister said that the leaders thanked US President Donald Trump for his efforts in bringing President Putin to table in pursuit of a ceasefire to end the ongoing bloodshed. Replying to a question after the virtual call, President Trump said that there would be consequences if Russia didn't end the war.
We had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelensky was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly. If the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately, and we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself if they'd like to have me there.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
I told the US President and all our European colleagues that Putin is bluffing. He's trying to put pressure before the meeting in Alaska, along with all part of the Ukrainian front. Russia is trying to show that it can occupy all of Ukraine. Of course, this is their desire. We must prepare a trilateral format for the conversation. There must be a ceasefire, number one. There must be really reliable security guarantees. Today, by the way, President Trump spoke about supporting this and about America's readiness to participate. Also, among the agreed principles, Russia cannot have a veto right over Ukraine's European and NATO perspectives. And peace talks should be combined with appropriate pressure on Russia. Sanctions must be in place and they must be strengthened if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire in Alaska.
In Alaska müssen grundlegende europäische und
Fundamental European and Ukrainian security interests must be safeguarded in Alaska. This was the message we as Europeans conveyed to US President Trump today, and I can say that we were in broad agreement both in our assessment of the current situation and in the achievable goal for next Friday.
als auch in dem erreichbaren Ziel.
So all eyes are on the big meeting between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, scheduled to be held in Alaska on August 15, as officials of the both countries are busy making preparations. Leaders of Russia and Ukraine are dialing their allies to brief the latest on the conflict. This is also seen as a crucial meeting since European leaders, according to President Donald Trump, want to see the deal done. Let's watch this report.
Just hours to go before the much-awaited meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin takes place at the Elmendorf Air Base in Anchorage, Alaska. As American and Russian officials scramble last minute with the details of the meeting, this is the first time the top leaders of both countries are meeting in 4 years, and also the first meeting of the leaders since the Russian-Ukraine conflict. The Russian Foreign Ministry has confirmed that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will attend the Alaska summit. Though Trump has recently expressed his disappointment on several occasions after his telephonic conversations with Putin, the president, according to the White House, looks forward to the meet as a feel-out meeting.
He said that this is really a feel-out meeting. He said, I'm going to meet with President Putin and we're going to see what he has in mind. And if it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders and also to President Zelensky. I'm going in to speak to Putin and I'm going to be telling him, you've got to end this war. You've got to end it.
Earlier, the Russian president spoke to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un over the phone to discuss the strengthening of bilateral ties. However, Kremlin said that the Russian president had briefed his North Korean counterpart about the much-anticipated meeting. According to North Korea's state-run television KRT, Putin expressed appreciation for North Korea's help in liberating the cursed region in western Russia in the war against Ukraine, praising the bravery, heroism, and self-sacrificing spirit of the Korean People's Army troops. Zelensky and Putin both had spoken to Prime Minister Modi as well. When Trump was asked if a deal could be reached with Putin, this is what he had to say.
Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made. How will you know that? Because that's what I do. I make deals.
But it's not just a meeting between the world's two biggest nuclear nations. There is a lot of pressure on the United States from the European leaders and Ukraine to impose sanctions on Russia following its invasion of Ukraine. But Trump has not imposed any sanctions so far. In fact, he on earlier occasions has referred to Putin as his friend. Recently, Trump's growing frustration with Moscow's handling of the war has had a ripple effect. While US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was in Moscow working out a Trump-Putin meeting, India, Russia's ally, bore the brunt of Trump's wrath after it was slapped with an additional 25% tariff for purchasing Russian oil. As Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will not be a part of this meeting, the talk about territorial concessions to reach a deal to end the war is a matter of great concern. Zelensky has refused to make any territorial concessions. European leaders too want that Moscow should end the war on terms acceptable to Kyiv and want to see the deal done. Apart from eastern Ukraine, Russia says its conditions set out last year remain unchanged. The full withdrawal of Kyiv's forces from key Ukrainian regions and the abandonment of its NATO ambitions. What is to be seen is whether Putin will be able to work his magic again and get what he wants.
My guess is Putin will be very amenable to making some changes. Maybe they're just cosmetic, but so that Trump can now claim ownership of the package. He can make it Trump's proposal, not the Putin proposal. Putin would be just fine with that. The real metric here, the person being tested is Putin. Not will Trump show he's tough, but will Putin be able to get the KGB mojo going again to reestablish the close personal relationship to get what he wants?
The last time an American president met Putin was President Joe Biden in 2021 in Geneva. President Trump during his first term had met Putin in Helsinki in Finland during a summit in 2018. Trump had also met Putin alone in 2017 during the first encounter at the G20 summit in Hamburg. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
So the question remains whether US President Donald Trump will be able to secure a ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine when he would be meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. I'm being joined by Ambassador Johnny Herbst, former US Ambassador to Ukraine, to discuss this issue further. Welcome to World Today, sir. And Ambassador Herbst, my first question to you would be, you might have heard President Zelensky saying in Berlin that Ukraine won't be ceding territory like Donbass for ceasefire, calling it an unconstitutional thing. How do you see President Donald Trump navigating this hard line when he would be meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday?
Well, I think the hard line is Russia's hard line, because Zelensky has accepted several Trump proposals for a ceasefire since March. Russia has accepted none. And Zelensky has let it be known that he understands territorial compromise might be required. But again, Putin's the one who insists on concessions up front. So that's the unacceptable, the obstructionist party. It would be good if India's policy understood that.
Absolutely. But Ambassador Herbst, in Berlin, you might have heard German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, also stressing the need for Europe's voice in peace talks during the press conference. He also mentioned that their interests, the European interests, also need to be safeguarded. Do you think President Donald Trump's feel-out meeting with President Putin risks sidelining the Ukrainian and its allies, and what are the dangers there?
There's no question that that's what Putin's trying to do. And in fact, Putin's already succeeded in persuading Trump not to meet his promise to put major sanctions on Russia if it doesn't achieve a ceasefire or agree to a ceasefire by August 8th. But I think the Trump team understands that they don't want to completely sideline Europe. They want Europe to be largely supportive. They want Ukraine to be largely supportive. That's why J.D. Vance spent all this time in the UK in recent days talking to the Europeans, including Ukrainians.
But Ambassador Herbs, President Zelensky also expressed skepticism about President Putin's good faith, and he said that there are no signs that Russia wants to end this war. From your experience, how should President Donald Trump approach President Putin to test his intentions without giving away too much?
I think Trump has said he wants to check out what Putin is thinking, which is good. But again, so far, not once since Trump became president for a second time has Putin demonstrated any willingness to compromise. His aim is to take effective political control of Ukraine. He wants more territory, and he thinks his troops on the ground will take more territory. That's why he refuses a ceasefire.
Also, I want your views on the recent statement of President Donald Trump, because just a while ago, President Trump said that Russia will face consequences if it doesn't end the war. And in your opinion, what could be the consequences for Russia?
Well, Trump was very clear in the recent weeks that the consequences include U.S. weapons being paid for by NATO countries going to Ukraine, and major economic sanctions, including tariffs on Russia and its trading partners. Trump kind of put the sanctions on hold last Friday, August 8th. But policy, this would put pressure on Putin to negotiate a durable peace, a ceasefire that could last for a long, long time. That would be a very good thing.
But Ambassador Herbs, during the virtual call, German Chancellor Merz and Ukrainian President Zelensky pushed for a strong pressure on Russia, like sanctions, to ensure an honest peace. What leverage does the United States have to make a ceasefire deal stick? And is President Donald Trump likely to use it?
Well, Trump began to use it before, again, last Friday, August 8th. If we put the serious sanctions on Russia's trading partners and on Russia itself, that will increase the pressure on Russia's economy, reduce Russian oil and gas revenues. That's one. And two, if we send American advanced weapons to Ukraine, paid for by Europe, by NATO partners, this will make it hard for Russia to make any gains on the battlefield. So Trump has the ability to force Putin to make at least a durable peace. And I hope that's what Trump will choose to do.
My final question to you, Russian forces are advancing in Donbass and President Zelensky is rejecting any land swap. What is a realistic outcome for this Alaska summit? Can President Donald Trump broker anything without Ukraine being on table?
Ukraine has to participate in any serious negotiation, and Trump has acknowledged that. I don't expect any progress towards peace in Anchorage because right now Putin thinks he's got the advantage over Trump, and Trump needs to demonstrate to Putin that that's not true. And so if Trump checks out Putin's views and reaches a sensible conclusion that Putin's not willing to negotiate seriously, then perhaps he'll return to a policy of pressure on the Kremlin. That could ultimately establish a stable peace.
Thank you, Ambassador Herbs, for joining on this broadcast and sharing your perspective with our viewers. Thank you very much. And moving on, now let's talk about Israel-Gaza conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has indicated that Gaza ceasefire efforts are now focused on a comprehensive deal to release all the remaining hostages at once. Meanwhile, Hamas delegation is in Cairo for preliminary talks with Egyptian officials. Let's have a look at this report.
A week after Israel's Security Cabinet approved Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to take full military control over Gaza, the Israeli military chief has now approved the framework for a new offensive targeting the seizure of Gaza City. Lieutenant General Ayal Zamir approved the main framework for the IDF's Gaza operation during a meeting with the General Staff Forum, Shin Bet officers and senior commanders. This development comes despite Zamir's early opposition to Netanyahu's plan, citing concerns over the heavy operational burden it would place on the IDF. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu hinted that ceasefire efforts in Gaza are now focused on a comprehensive deal aimed at releasing all remaining hostages at once, rather than in phases.
In any case, they will leave a lot of hostages in their hands, both the living and the dead, and we want them all. I want them all, both the living and the dead. That's why we are going for this. And I'm not telling you that I won't be willing to discuss it. I want to bring everyone back as part of ending the war.
Meanwhile, Hamas has demanded a permanent ceasefire, the release of prisoners, and Israel's withdrawal from the enclave in exchange for freeing hostages. Indirect talks brokered by Egypt and Qatar have stalled, but Hamas senior leader Khalil al-Hayya arrived in Cairo earlier this week for fresh discussions on the possible ceasefire. The IDF chief's approval comes amid mounting international condemnation and increasing domestic opposition to Netanyahu's plan to assume full military control of Gaza. However, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City have intensified, with residential neighborhoods like Zaitun and Sebra hit by very heavy strikes targeting civilian homes. Netanyahu's government has yet to provide a clear timeline for when Israeli troops will enter Gaza City. While Israel is planning to assume full military control over Gaza, the US has reportedly prepared a plan to relocate Palestinians to Somalia. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
And moving on the show, let's talk about the increasing and cozying up of US and Pakistani partnership here. Because the United States has applauded Pakistan's continued success in containing terrorist group threatening regional and global security following counter-terrorism talks in Islamabad. In a joint statement, Washington also expressed condolences for victims of recent terror attacks in Pakistan, including the Jafar Express train bombing and Khuzdar school bus attack. The dialogue addressed threats from Balochistan Liberation Army, BLA, and ISIS Khorasan and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The discussion came a day after Washington's designation of separatist BLA and its armed wing, the Majid Brigade, as a foreign terrorist organization. Both countries reaffirmed their long-standing partnership and stressing that sustained and structured engagement is essential for effectively combating terrorism and advancing peace and stability. And now let's talk about an issue concerning the safety and security of Indians in Ireland, because hate-fueled attacks against Indians in Ireland shows no sign of abating. In the latest incident, another Indian man in Dublin was reportedly assaulted by a group of teenagers over the weekend. The incident marks the fourth racist attack in Dublin within a month and comes after President Michael D. Higgins condemned the violence as despicable while expressing a deep sense of gratitude for the Indian community. According to the victims, assault occurred around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. As he was walking home from Fairview Park, a teenager grabbed his metal water bottle and struck him above the eye, causing a deep wound that required 8 stitches. As he attempted to flee, 2 more assailants joined in and punching and beating him until he fell, after which the attack continued. Now he plans to return back to India due to trauma of this incident. This attack is part of a disturbing pattern of violence targeting Indian nationals in Ireland. Other recent incidents included a man being stripped and beaten following a false accusation in Talat, another man assaulted while returning from a friend's apartment, and a 6-year-old girl was also attacked in Waterford. And let's listen in what Adita Kulkarni has shared with me in a recent interview.
This is not the recent incidents. Like it was happening from around last 6 to 7 years. So starting from 2022 or 2020, people like have been attacked. But due to the recent incidents, that was happened last month in Thala, which is highlighted by Irish lady, and she posted a video. And due to this, it's highlighted all over the media. And now somehow our government, Indian embassy, Irish government, and the Garda, they have started looking into it, and like they are approaching towards stop this racism. But somehow the attacks was done by teenagers, and we don't have teenagers law here in Ireland. So that was the main reason. And if you can see, people are now started reporting those attacks. We represent Indian community in Ireland like from last 4 to 5 years, and like we have been many complaints received via email, via WhatsApp, that hey, I've been attacked, what to do. So we just ask them to just to file an official complaint with the Garda. So this is how we approach them. But somehow people fear that why we have to raise the complaint because of the visa, because of the critical skill permissions in Ireland. We have not get the exact assurance from the police authority. We just got the most common answers that they will looking into it. But last week itself, we just had a meeting with Simon Harris, who is a Vice Prime Minister of Ireland. We call it as Tansett. So Indian community had a meeting with Tansett, and he mentioned that he definitely in 2 weeks time he will just observing the conditions, and he will make some planning just to increase more patrolling with the Garda, more community safety concerns, like how they can manage those concerns. So this is how, but no firm assurance from Irish government.
You can watch the full interview of Adita Kulkarni, representative of Indian community in Ireland, on India Today Global. And let's move on and talk about China as well, because China's Evergrande, once nation's biggest property developer, will be delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange on August 25. Exactly 16 years after going public, marking a day on a key moment in China's 4-year property crisis. Here is a report.
China Evergrande, once the country's largest property developer, is now history on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. On August 25, exactly 16 years after it first went public, the company's shares will be delisted, marking a grim milestone in a property crisis now dragging into its 4th year. At its peak in 2017, Evergrande was worth over $50 billion, the face of China's housing boom. Its unraveling began in 2020 when Beijing launched a crackdown on debt-laden property giants. That exposed Evergrande's staggering liabilities, more than $350 billion. By August 2021, reports of large-scale construction stoppages emerged. A month later, the company defaulted on interest payments on 2 offshore bonds. Trading in Evergrande shares was suspended in October 2021. 2 years later, its chairman was placed under house arrest. In January 2024, a Hong Kong court ordered the company's liquidation. The fallout is massive. Evergrande has more than 1,300 projects in over 280 cities, many still unfinished. Hundreds of thousands of buyers are waiting for homes they've already paid for. And it's not just Evergrande. New home sales by China's top 100 developers have plunged over 20% for 2 straight months. Despite government stimulus, analysts now expect any real recovery only by 2026. The wider property sector, once a quarter of China's GDP, is weighed down by an estimated $8 to $9 trillion in debt, including hidden liabilities. Economists say the slowdown is shaving up to 1 percentage point of China's growth. Home prices have already fallen 20% since 2021, with fears of another 10% drop ahead. Evergrande is simply the largest casualty in a long list. Hong Kong courts have issued at least 6 wind-up orders for Chinese developers since 2021. Others, like China South City and Sunak, are already attempting second restructuring plans after the first ones failed. It's not just homeowners. Creditors have taken a big hit as well. Liquidators say asset recovery has been modest. In Evergrand's case, just $255 million so far, much of it tied up in complex ownership structures. Offshore creditors may recover as little as 3.5 cents on the dollar. The crisis has hit ordinary Chinese citizens the hardest, from families paying mortgages on undelivered homes to local governments grappling with collapsing land sale revenues and mounting debt. China's leadership has signaled it will not fully reverse its 2020 crackdown on over-leveraging, even if it means allowing weaker firms to fail. Evergrand's collapse is part of a far deeper structural crisis. China's real estate sector, once the country's biggest engine of growth, is now weighed down by unsustainable debt, oversupply, falling prices, and fragile consumer confidence. Challenges that could reshape the Chinese economy and alter the very foundation of its growth model. Bureau Report, Business Today TV.
And now let's show you a story of marketing story and strategy going south in Japan. McDonald's Japan apologizes after Pokemon card promo sparks chaos and food waste. McDonald's Japan has apologized and cancelled a limited time Happy Meal campaign after it led to food waste, long lines, and public backlash. The promotion, which included exclusive Pokemon cards and toys like mini Pikachu figures, was intended for children but quickly attracted adults, collectors, and resellers. The Happy Set meal sold out in a single day. In the frenzy to collect the cards, some of which later appeared online for hundreds of dollars, customers bought large quantities of meal, discarded the food, and left piles of trash outside the stores. That's all in this edition of World Today. For more international stories, you can log on to India Today Global. Take care. Good night.